challenging discussion with essentially one gentleman and his administration, the President of the United States. But we do need to remember that as well, and we need to push for that free and fair trade environment moving forward. It's good for North American families, and I would say it's good for all of us and good for the world when North America is doing well.
My last question, do you have any plans in place to assist steel workers, companies in the province in light of the tariffs?
We're working closely with the steel industry on how we can use the strength of a Saskatchewan economy to actually support the work that they do and keep them employed.
Thank you.
You will see what that may or may not mean in the days ahead, as we have been actively engaged with numerous employers in that industry on how we can work together to support the work that they do in maybe a little bit different and innovative ways than what we've even seen before. So there'll be more details to come, I think, in the not too distant future. But with the implementation of steel and aluminum tariffs, and this is how quickly this is happening, we saw yesterday, the threat of a electrical tariff on Ontario Power going into 3 states. We saw the response of I think 25 or 50% increase to this industry. A phone call settled that down. We ended the day where we started with the implementation of the 25% steel and aluminum tariffs. That's how quickly things are changing. And so what we are doing is looking at how we can use the strength and diversity of the Saskatchewan economy, which it is great, and it has increased substantially over the last 16 or 17 years, tripled essentially, or more, and using that to support the industries that are here.
But you're talking about the United States a lot here, but there's another tariff deadline that we're coming up to, and it's a day after your provincial budget is going to be tabled on March 20th, with a 100% increase to canola. SARM president yesterday said it's the Cinderella crop of this province. This could decimate the canola sector in your entire province. What is your budget going to say to farmers to address what looks like the freight train that's coming towards Saskatchewan canola farmers?
Yeah, I'm not sure you're going to hear the budget speak specifically to this, but you're going to hear the Saskatchewan government speak specifically to this. And this is a response of a policy decision by the federal government on Chinese EVs. And as I've said, Chinese EVs coming into Canada, they're tariffed at 100%. The response is, 100%, and the response is 100% tariff on canola, as well as a tariff on seafood and pork. Chinese EVs, nobody's buying them in Canada. And it's there to support the North American EV auto industry, which few can afford. But it is essentially shutting down jobs and opportunity for Saskatchewan canola crush facilities and the people that work in them, but ultimately shutting down, as you say, the opportunity for Saskatchewan agricultural producers to grow the most profitable crop that we have had access to growing and have really developed here over the last number of decades, and that's canola. And so we need to work with our federal government and push our federal government to ensure that they are engaging. And that's the first signal that has to happen, is our federal minister, and we've reached out to them. They need to reach out to the Chinese government and engage on this topic and find a path forward on behalf of not only canola producers, but I've talked to my colleagues in Atlantic Canada who are going to feel the brunt of this when it comes to their seafood exports, and much of the pork exports come out of Manitoba as well. And so I would expect that we'll have at least 4 allies in Atlantic Canada and likely an ally in Manitoba as well, because they're impacted not to the degree that we are. This, make no mistake, 100% tariff on Chinese canola and meal exports, alongside the challenge that we're seeing in the United States with the on and off again tariffs on various products, it will decimate the canola industry in Saskatchewan immediately in a matter of number of weeks, not months.
So earlier this morning, Premier Doug Ford sat down with Prime Minister-designate Mark Carney over breakfast. What's your message to the Prime Minister-designate as he's about to take office? Because it sounds like it's going to be tomorrow when he's going to be sworn in.
Yeah.
What's your message? Are you hoping to have a sit-down conversation with him before any potential federal election, whether it be next week, week after, or who knows when?
I would expect to have a phone call or a sit down with what is right now Prime Minister-designate Carney, and my advice to him has been quite clear. Canadians need to know what the plan is on how he's going to engage with our largest trading partner, the United States of America. And across-the-board tariffs simply are going to hurt Canadians. Counter tariffs will simply hurt Canadians. Second is, how are you going to engage on a very urgent and looming issue that is going to impact one of the largest agricultural commodities we export, both to the U.S. and to China. And so the question is, how do we, one, move forward in support of this industry? Two, how are you as our federal government going to engage with the country of China to ensure that these tariffs are very, very short-lived? As you said, they're poised to come in just over a week. And three, you need to keep your campaign commitments, and one of them is to ditch the carbon tax, most silly and inflationary tax that this nation has ever seen, and it needs to be removed and removed completely.
Municipal revenue sharing. The education mill rate is going down, costs are up, including the money going to pay teachers in the next budget after arbitration. There will be also much resource revenue with the tariff, so how are we planning to pay for all of this?
Through the strength of the growing, vibrant economy we have, of which I spoke to at length over the course of the last hour, and we should be very fortunate. And as I said, we're very fortunate for what Saskatchewan people do in allowing and ensuring that economy continues to grow. Our wealth comes from our export value. Not just growing more products or producing more products, but producing higher value products. Canola as opposed to barley, for example. Canola oil, shipping canola oil as opposed to canola seed. That's how we are seeing, the increase since 2007 in the value of our exports to over 160 countries, which was $17 billion in that year, grow to just under $50 billion in the last 3 years. We've been running in that $45 to $50 billion range, and poised to go up. With the investments that you see, whether they be in the potash industry, the uranium industry, the copper mining industry, and still have investments in the canola crush industry that are going to be coming on, and we're going to be shipping higher value products from those facilities. And so, more work to do on continuing to attract that investment, but credit to the people of Saskatchewan that are very much going to and doing whatever they do day in, day out, and allowing for that strong, vibrant economy to continue to grow, so that we can come forward with a tax freeze on our education property tax like we did, but still quite likely, and you'll have to wait a week for the announcement of budget day, but quite likely increase our education investment as well, and increase our expectations around the outcomes of our students who are our children and grandchildren, in particular in that K-3 space.
SARM is asking the provincial government to use the powers of the Saskatchewan First Act to reinstate the use of strychnine to help control the gopher population. Is that something that the province is thinking about or will support? Or? Yeah,
it's needed, and we're going to look into it. It is needed, as we see in many areas, in particular in beef-producing areas. There's a problem with some of the rodents that are out there. So it's a request by SARM, and all the requests that SARM brings to the provincial government we have a look at, and if we're able to do them, we do. And case in point was the movement around the training opportunities that we were able to provide fire departments in destroying some of the derelict buildings in some of our not only rural Saskatchewan communities, but any Saskatchewan community. And so we will look into it.
There's people and organizations concerned regarding that topic about the other animals that might be eating the poison, like birds, stuff like that. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, and there's farmers that are concerned with what gophers and pocket gophers and things are doing to their ranch land, and so there's concern all around. And we certainly, as the request has come from SARM through the ag producers that they represent, and I say that equally our government, the government of Saskatchewan represents, we will look into it, taking all things into account. If there's other control methods that are available and effective, maybe those can be suggested. But those concerns are as valid as any, but we'll look into it.
$10 a day childcare. Are there talks yet with the feds about signing that contract?
Yeah, and I would expect we will. Credit to the federal government. Each provincial program is somewhat different. And that is the outcome of signing bilaterals, as each program is different with a little bit different focuses, and it allowed provinces to bring within the parameters of the program some of their focuses forward. Ours is to expand the number of spaces that are available across the province, and so we're in those negotiations. We weren't able to complete those negotiations in the 2-week timeline that the federal government had gave the provinces, but we expect to sign on. And we sign on as soon as we're able to have all of the initiatives and questions that we have addressed by the federal government.
Just to go back to the budget, how realistic are these increased investments that you're speaking of, just given all the challenges you've spoken about this morning? And think it was just a few weeks ago, you mentioned how the budget likely won't have any sort of tariff contingencies. I just wonder how realistic these increased investments are, or if they're just
Well, so if you see the tariff contingencies that I've seen in other budgets at this point in time are deficit spending, and so whether you have them in the original budget or whether they're required throughout the year, the result is the same. What I would say is, and I'm not going to jump in front of our Minister of Finance on what some of the numbers may or may not look like next week. But this is a budget very much that is going to deliver in the priorities that we had outlined, not only in the campaign, but in our speech from the throne. Continuing to ensure that Saskatchewan is the most affordable place to live, access to healthcare providers and surgeries, access and funding being provided, building on some of the successes that we have seen, for example, the specialized support classrooms to improve our K-3 outcomes, and to work with our school divisions to ensure that we actually are achieving higher levels of outcomes in that K-3 space, and we know what a high educational outcome at grade 3 will provide in the way of opportunities for that student, who again is our child and grandchild, in grades 4 through 12 and throughout their life. And last but not least is addressing the scourge of drugs that have entered our continent, our nation, our province, and our communities. And we are very much focused on providing those recovery opportunities, but increasing the law enforcement and the laws that we have the ability to increase provincially, the consequences for those that are bringing that poison into our communities, and we'll work with the federal government on that as well. That is really what you're going to see a focus on in this budget, and I don't think that would be a surprise, because that was the priorities. Those were exactly the priorities that we had put forward in our speech from the throne. With respect to the numbers, I'll defer to our Minister of Finance, and I'll allow him for 1 week until he introduces the budget.
A couple of weeks ago, you were hoping that the tariffs wouldn't be put in place.
Still am.
Or now,
Yeah.
I guess. But I asked you about whether there was any contingency plan for people, for relief for people in Saskatchewan in the upcoming budget. Has that been reconsidered at this point, or not?
Well, there's a number of ways that relief or addressing challenges can be addressed. We talked a little bit about the steel and aluminum tariffs that are coming on, or came on here at midnight. We have an economy that is very much a consumer of various types of steel and even aluminum to a degree. And so what the government can at times do is bring people together to ensure that we are supporting one another in what is really unprecedented times, where trade agreements are not only being violated but thrown out the window to speak of. And so we're engaging with respect to that, and I use that as an example, and we'll have more to say on that in the next number of days. But make no mistake, this is going to be a challenging time. When we've had trade challenges before, I think back to some phytosanitary challenges with China, some of the trade non-tariff barriers that we had worked through in India. Back to China 6 years ago with the United States on steel, aluminum, and potentially uranium. I don't know that we've ever faced across-the-board tariff challenges with our largest trading partner, the United States of America, and a 100% tariff on canola, that canola oil and canola meal that would be finding its way to our second largest market, which is China. And so this is unprecedented times, and there's going to be unprecedented consequences with this. And we need to work, and I think expect our federal government to be working on behalf of these industries that are contributing so much to not only our local communities in the way of that export wealth, but our provincial and national community as well. And so we've been engaging with our federal government, and despite the terrible situation that our federal government has put us in, where we are facing these trade challenges at a time when their leader stepped aside, they have a new leader, and we're going to be quite likely into an election sooner rather than later, which needs to happen, so that we have someone with a mandate that can negotiate on Canadians' behalf. In the meantime, there is going to be many, many challenges that lie at the feet of the minority Liberal government and the NDP.
So, quick last question, if Bill can jump in, because I have a question for both of you, if you can both answer at the same time, if you don't mind. Do you have a good partnership with SARM, with SUMA? Does your government work well with municipalities? And for Bill, President Huber, do you feel like you're being heard by this government?
I'll let Bill go.
Thank you, Premier. Yes, I think they're listening and they hear us. And we've got an excellent working relationship with the provincial government and Premier Moe and his cabinet. I'm extremely impressed with the cabinet that we're working with now, and I talked to Premier Moe earlier this morning when we first met, that he's picked an excellent group to represent us, and we look forward to the years ahead in my tenure here as president to work with this administration.
And I would say you'd see some of that work on, with announcements this week in SARM, going back to it, but never discounting the municipal revenue sharing, which was called for by Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities many, many times before it was delivered by this government in 2000 and 2008. I believe it was Bill number 1, if I remember correctly, was it not? Bill number 1 of a new government. Today you see that work continue in the way of addressing a concern raised by municipalities to their provincial organization, and Bill and his team had raised it with the relevant ministers around derelict buildings in our communities. You saw, I think, in the Bear Pit on some of the work that we're going to engage on over the course of the next year, whether that be with some of the challenges around amalgamation of small villages into RMs, and how can we work together with all levels of municipalities and SARM to support and streamline.
Right? Sorry.
No.
I want to make sure that's all.
No. But that's work that has yet to be done as challenges change over time. They're changing pretty quick recently in the way of trade, but we're committed to working with our partners on what the future might look like.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.